Hey, welcome back, or welcome, I suppose. This is going to be our first review session, so I could ramble on for a bit, or I could get right into it. So we're going to start off with Mark Billingham's Crybaby. I don't know if that's high enough. Probably. It is what it is. I bloody loved it. It took me a bit to get into, more than the other two books of his that I've read. While I don't know these characters particularly well, because I've only read one other Tom Thorne novel, that is the one that came out before this, Their Little Secret, I still felt like I got a lot out of it in terms of learning about characters, and it's definitely not made me realise, I think it's cemented that I want to read more from this series. It's sort of one of those things where it's like, I don't want to keep getting more books, but I believe there's a lot of them at my local library, so I'll probably get them from there, just because I don't want to... The whole point of my project this year is to read through my shelf. I don't want to keep stacking it too much. I say that, I know what's coming later on in this video, but basically it is the story of the disappearance of... This is not true crime, by the way, I should point that out. This is fiction. But yeah, it's the disappearance of a little boy called Kieran, and it is one of Thorne's... It's not one of Thorne's early cases, but it's a case earlier in his career that has stuck with him for a very long time. It's something that remains with him and harkens back to something else that happened earlier on in his career, which is something I assume that has been referenced later in the series. If you... Not later in the series, earlier in the series, later in his life. Prequel confusion there, but yeah, it is. So the disappearance of Kieran Coyne, this little boy, he's out with his friend and their two mothers. At some point, the little boys, they're in the park, they go out into the woods, they play hide and seek, and Josh, his friend, runs back, and there's no sign of Kieran. He's gone missing, and they've got to solve that case. It's done really well. The fact that this is dealing with children, crimes that happen to children, I think it's handled really tactfully. With Kieran in particular, there's a lot of perspective shifts. So most of it is from, well, not from Thorne's perspective, but it's third person, but with a particular character focus, and that is usually on Tom Thorne. But there are a few different perspective changes, and one of those is with Kieran, the missing boy, while he is being held captive. And thankfully, there's nothing too sinister in terms of what you might think. It's all dealt with really tactfully. I should also point out, this is going to be spoiler free for both books. Unless I find it absolutely necessary, I will pretty much always be spoiler free, and if I am going to be spoiling something, I will put a timestamp in the edit. So yeah, that's that. But yeah, this is spoiler free. So yeah, most of the time when it's on Kieran's perspective, he's on his own. Or now I won't say who he's with, because that comes on to something else that I was talking about, that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But no matter what, it's dealt with really well. He's never really with the adult that took him. The man is usually... That's not a spoiler that it's a man. I mean, it's a crime book. It's usually a man. That guy's usually upstairs, or he's away, and there's a lot of Kieran worrying about, well, when will he come back, or has he gone to get my mum because that's what he promised, or his dad, or something like that. And it's really tactfully done, and I appreciate that, because there is some crime fiction that just decides, even when they're dealing with stuff that's rough, it's crime, it's all rough, but like stuff like this, where they still want to put some details in that I'd appreciate they didn't. And I'm thankful that Billingham is respectful enough to not do that, you know, because it is implied later on that, you know, there was some of what you would expect for a reason that an adult might take a child. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, in terms of when it is revealing it's a crime book, you always have a reveal of the criminal. Well, usually you have a reveal of the criminal. I was surprised. He was not on my radar at all. This is not like, it's not a randomly established character, but at first I wasn't hugely pleased about it. I'm not gonna lie. And then I sat and thought about it for a bit, and I got really uncomfy. So early on, there was a few mentions of the fact that Kieran, the missing boy, and his friend who he was out with, Josh, look like each other. They look like they could be siblings. And I thought something's going to come of this. And at first, I was like, oh, I was reading back through my notes and I was like, oh, no, it didn't. And then I was like, oh, it did. And it, sinister is the only word I can think of to use for it. It sat really uneasily with me because it's just one of those things that you put like a little bit of thought into, and then you don't want to take anything else, like take any other thoughts with it, because it's just, oh, it's uncomfy. And it's a really subtle bit of writing, but it's brilliantly done. I was expecting, I think I had like 3 or 4 suspects going through. You always do, you know, there's the ones that you go, I mean, maybe it will be the person that they find straight away, and you think it's probably not. I had 2 by the end, until that final reveal. I think I had 2 main. My stomach just made the weirdest noise. Sorry. No idea if I'll have to like keep that in because I don't know if I'll be able to edit that out. Um yeah, so I had 2 main suspects. One of them being a character that you meet really early on. Um I'm not going to say who because again, then you'll find out, oh, it's not them. But, one of them being this person, because I just thought, oh, he's subtly pushing it, but he's not pushing it hard. And the other person was, I don't know if he was pushing that it could be this person, or if, like, if I'm supposed to have him as a suspect, or if it's a case of maybe I'm reading too much into it. But either way, I was wrong. But I was happy to be wrong, you know. Sometimes there is a vindication with reading crime novels where you're like, I was right, I knew it. Because I had that with Rabbit Hole, another one of his that I read, where it's revealed who did it, and I'm like, I had, again, you always have a few suspects. You're never just on one when you're reading a crime book. And I got it right. One of my suspects was right, and I was like, I'm getting. The revelation was not my favourite at first, but again, thinking about it just a little bit longer, oh, oh, awful, terrible. But like, obviously good writing, but terrible when you think about it. And it's just like, nasty. There's only one other thing I want to talk about, and that is very much on a personal note. That as soon as I heard the word pathologist, I was so happy. There is a character that obviously I met, you would have met much earlier if you've been reading the Tom Thorne series, called Phil Hendricks. And I love this man. Oh my god. he's very like, he's a sort of guy like gallows humor, very dry, and he's just so much fun. And like, even though the first book I read with him, you know, I didn't read a physical book, I had an audiobook, so yeah, the Manchester accent is made a bit clear. It's really obvious that he's northern, and that's written really well. He's from Blackley in Manchester, and he's just, oh, he's so funny. And their meeting, because this book being a prequel, this is actually how they met, is exactly how I expected it. They have this phone call because they're trying to get him as an on-call pathologist onto the scene of a murder. Or is it a murder? A suspected murder, I think, at that point. But like, it's not a spoiler to say that he's that is a murder because it's made very clear. But it's so funny when he's just a bit of an arse. But in that way that you're like, oh, I'm gonna love him. Like if this was the first book, for example, not a prequel, I'd have that thing in my chest. I'm like, oh, he's gonna be such a bitch, and I'm gonna love him so much. And I do. I just think he's so funny the way they bond, and as in the way Thorne and Hendricks bond so quickly. It's just I'm just like yes, and like enemies to besties like that. I love it. Did I just say besties? Ew, didn't like that. And quite frankly, for me, the way he's written as a gay character just feels so right. Like that would be the sort of gay rep that I want to see more of, because it's not one of those things where it's like being gay is the only thing that his character is, but also it's not one of his. Here is a fully fledged character, also like gay on the side, kind of thing, where it feels like it's a completely different. It's not part of him. It's just sort of. He is a three-dimensional character in which his sexuality is an aspect, and I appreciate that because that is sort of how sexuality actually works. It is not 100% of somebody's being, but it's also not something that sort of sits outside of them, and Billingham just writes him so well. Like, there's this one scene where this is set in the mid-90s. I can't remember if I said that. Set in 96 during the Euros, and that's not just like a random sort of. The Euros is like sort of going on in the background throughout this, and he's just had a bit of a heart-to-heart with Thorne. I say that Thorne's basically had a bit of a, he sort of got a lot of things off his chest, and and Hendricks is thinking about the fact that maybe one day he might be able to come out, but it's not likely because the industry he's in, the time and the industry he's in, people would tear him apart. It's as simple as that. So he is fully tattooed and pierced and dressing, like kind of punk and all that, because that's what people look at. They make assumptions based on that rather than making assumptions about something deeper. And that really, that hit me in a very particular way. I just, Christ. Like, I remember sitting and reading that, and I was genuinely, I think I was close to tears, because I'm like, yeah, I did a lot of that when I was younger. A lot of that, like, I'm a little emo kid, and I'm barely grown out of it, but like, I'm a bit of an emo kid, but not in the same way that it was all like, if I wear black eyeliner and all this, like, that's a thing that people focused on. And yeah, it just, oh man, beautifully written, genuinely beautifully written. I cannot help but recommend this book. Quite frankly, it's just so good. Sorry to feel like I'm suddenly jumping to that, but it's sort of like overall I love it. I think it's brilliant. I think that you don't have to read other books from this series. I'm definitely going to at some point, but it's not a priority because Billingham is a good enough writer that he can write sort of. I think as a lot of crime books are, even in series, you get it a lot where this is an individual book, but it fits really well into the whole. He does that brilliantly, though. If you are worried about the idea of feeling like you're missing out, there are sort of two options. You can either go and start reading the Tom Thorne series. I am going to be reading Sleepyhead at some point, which is his first novel. Or there was a book he released, I want to say last year. I think that's when I got it. I got it last year. It might have been released a little bit earlier, but it's definitely been released during the pandemic because there is some reference to it because it's set in a medical setting. And that is called Rabbit Hole. It's a brilliant book. I recommend the audiobook, which is read by Maxine Peake, who, I mean, I don't even have to say it. Obviously, she's phenomenal. Next up, we have French Exit by Patrick deWitt. I think I said deWitt the first time, but to be fair, this is all in caps, and generally when you see it written down in sort of regular font or regular typeface or whatever, I don't know, text, but when you see it written regularly, normally, whatever, there's a different like capitalization, so it makes it a bit more clear. But anyway, back to it. I enjoyed this book. There's not much I really particularly want to say about it. It felt a bit like when I have previously read a book for uni and it turns out, or at school or college or whatever, but like when I've had to read a book for study and then it turns out I really enjoyed it. So I was originally going to edit this next bit out, but I was so no thoughts, head empty, that I feel like you just have to see it because I think it's funny. I didn't at the time. Quite frankly, I was having such a like. I'm getting it now a little bit. I get it all the time, but my brain just sort of like off for a bit, and I'm like, bruh, I kind of need you to work, but yeah, I hope you enjoy. You know what? Enjoy me having a moment where my brain genuinely felt like nothing was coming in, so nothing could come out. Hey, and at least I remembered the author later on. You'll see what I mean. I had that with Portrait of the Artist as a young... Oh, what is it? I'll have it somewhere, and I can't be bothered trying to look for it. I think it's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Dog by... Why is my brain falling out? Dylan Thomas. Right, let's try that again. This book felt like where I've had to read a book for study, and it turns out I've really enjoyed it. Like Portrait of the Artist as a Young Dog by Dylan Thomas. I had that with that. And the second time I read it, I actually had it with Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Which obviously, yeah. Brain's falling out. One of the most famous Irish authors, and but no, brain's falling out. Won't let me. Oh my god, that's awful. Editing me is gonna have a fit. I'll remember, like, as soon as I turn off record. Look, anyway, it felt like enjoying a book that I was made to study and being pleased about it, which means I probably wouldn't read it again. Sometimes I would with those books, sometimes I wouldn't. You know, I've had books in the past where it feels like I should be studying it, and generally I don't enjoy it. I'm reading, spoiler alert, I'm reading Atonement at the minute, not for this, but for the Bad Rep Book Club, because it seems to me that Ian McEwan is very divisive, and I'm having that thing with that where it's just I feel like I'm studying it, and it's hard to get through. Again, spoiler alert. And I sometimes had that with this, where I felt like I've got a certain amount of pages I have to read a day, and like that's what I've got to get through, if you will. I think I was reading like 35 pages a day this, and sometimes I did, some days I didn't read all of that, because it's a particular writing style that I think I was struggling with. It is a recent book. I think it came out in 2018. I can check that right now. Yeah, this came out in 2018. And it is not written as if it came out then. And I don't know if that is generally deWitt's style, or if he is trying to make it sound like an older book. Again, I haven't read anything else of his, so I wouldn't know. While I was reading it, I wasn't having a bad time, and it's genuinely funny. It's like a tragicomedy, I would call it. Tragicomedy? Tragicomic? What is it that Bechdel called her, autobiography? A tragicomic, I think. It's a bit like that. It's definitely not, a laugh a minute kind of thing, but it's not a tragedy in the terms of you come out of it feeling absolutely depressed. Uh, which I know that's not necessarily what a tragedy is. You've got classic tragedy like something like Hamlet, which does have its, light-hearted moments. There are funny moments in that, but yeah, I'm glad that I borrowed this. Let's put it that way. If I'd have spent money on it, it probably would have kept going back on the shelf. And if I wasn't reading this for review, I don't know that I would have finished it. Which is a shame, because it is a really good book, and it's obviously technically brilliantly written. It is genuinely witty and funny, but I just don't think it's for me. I think that's a better way of putting it. This is not a bad book by any means, and I know people who would really enjoy this. I've got a few friends who I would probably send this to and say, hey, I think you'd really enjoy it. But for me, it wasn't ticking some boxes for me. And yeah, I'm aware that I read a lot more sort of commercial fiction than classic literary fiction, and I try to read more literary fiction, and yes, they're basically the same thing a lot of the time. I'm not getting into that. Let's be real, a lot of fiction, stuff that isn't genre fiction, it's all the same sort of stuff. It just depends on how classy you are, kind of thing. Not classy, what's the word I'm trying to think of? It's just like, it depends what circles this book is being lauded in. Like, if I get one of, I'm trying to think of the right book on my shelf to read it, to compare it to, but I don't think I really have anything. But if I get any of my like contemporary books in terms of not necessarily the romance stuff, but like, see, that's the thing, right? I've got Ali Smith on here. Now, I have seen Ali Smith with, I've got Autumn and Winter. I've only read Autumn. I haven't read Winter yet, I don't think. I might have read Winter. I can't remember. But I've seen Ali Smith put in both literary and contemporary fiction, and I don't know really the difference. If somebody could explain it to me, I've got a master's degree, for God's sake. I've got a bachelor's in English and creative writing. I've got a master's in creative writing. I still couldn't tell you the difference, not really, between literary and contemporary fiction, other than I probably wouldn't study contemporary fiction. And I would study this. I really enjoyed the escapades. And also, I don't really understand the description of, who is it? What's it? Yeah, they call Malcolm adult age and toddler brained. I don't know that that's true. I think he's stuck with his mother, and I think he doesn't know how to say no. But frankly, I I don't know that a childlike description of him is necessarily right once you delve into it. Now, yeah, he's not necessarily the most mature, but it makes sense. Yeah, like I said, I don't think I can talk about this book too much because I'm just going to go over the same points over again. So I I'm not going to say that I don't recommend this book, because I'm just going to say that this wasn't for me. I don't even think I went over the plot, but that's because it's kind of hard to describe. Basically, you have a New York socialite and her adult son end up going sort of bankrupt, and they have to move to one of the mother's friends' apartments in Paris. And it's, I think I called it upper class debauchery. I think that's what I said I thought it was going to be in. Yeah, it kind of is. More middle class, maybe, debauchery than upper class, but like real, like exactly what you'd expect from like socialite kind of. I think that's like the main word. I think the best way to describe the kind of person that Frances is, who is the mother, is just imagine her being pretty much any character played by, now I don't know this actress's name, but I will, you know what, I will put a picture of her here. And I feel like I should know this actress's name, but I haven't watched American Horror Story in a long time, and that is where I know her from. And every time Frances was present, and every time she spoke, that's who I imagined. I feel like I do know her name, but again, I'll put it there. Yeah. It always feels strange, because I think if I'd have bought the written reviews, I always had a habit of going, yeah, but I thought it was great, recommend it, well done. But like, I'm not going to necessarily sit here and recommend this. I think it's one that you might want to... James Joyce, oh my god. That's who I forgot earlier. About, I mean, what, 10, 20 minutes ago? I forgot the name, James Joyce. I'm gonna have to edit that out. I'm not. You know what? Maybe I should be shamed for my brain switching off. It does it all of the time. Maybe in the next 20 minutes, I'll remember the actress who I'm thinking of. I actually don't know if I know her name off the top of my head, but if I think about it too hard, it will fall out. So, oh, I'm like the epitome of no thoughts, head empty today. So, yeah, I think that's that wrapped up. Complicated feelings about that. Maybe look it up. Maybe I'll watch the film. That's meant to be good. On to next week's read. Now, I was having a bit of a time with this, figuring out, because I got a new book. Because last week, when I said, oh, I'm pretty sure that Lucy Diamond has a new book coming out, the day that came out, her new book came out. So I got it online, but I got it from Waterstones. So this is Anything Could Happen by Lucy Diamond. It is signed. I didn't know that when I bought it, so that's nice. I assume it's just like the first however many from Waterstones are signed, but I was curious as to whether I should write down the name of this and put it in the box, or if I should read it straight away. Now, I think, given that this project of reading through my bookshelf is about just that, it's about actually reading the books that I buy, I am going to read this week rather than pulling something out of the box. So, do a quick overview. So this seems to be about, well, it's about a mother and a daughter, and once the daughter turns 18, she wants to know more about her father, and obviously I've just read the blurb, so I don't know much more about it than that, but essentially interesting. I mean, I was going to buy this no matter what it was about, because I think Lucy Diamond is a wonderful writer. I have read 3 of her books now. One is a shorter story, part of like quick reads, I think they're called. There's a few of them at the library, and I think they're wonderful. It's called Baby at the Beach Cafe. I read The Promise and Year of Taking Chances, and I thought every one of them was wonderful. She's just one of those authors that she just makes me feel happy, even when I'm crying, because inevitably at some point during this I will have a big cry, because that always seems to happen. But it's worth it, because there's always that thing at the end where you're just like, oh, warmth, fuzziness. Oh, and I hope I get that this time. Next up, because I'm still going to read 2, the 6 are the best. Well, 5 are the best now. I think that is quite a chunky book, but it's no different than the length of a lot of these. What's this one about again? Yeah, this is like the crime, but also folks. Right. I think to get over and get out of the way as soon as I can, remembering the whole wicked light nonsense, I will put that in here if I remember. The Wicker Light. I think that says Wicker. That is a slightly. It says Wicker or Wicked, and I can't. That's a font. The Wicker Light by Mary Watson, and yes, I am aware it says Wicker. I still don't know why I thought that was a D. So that's why I'm getting it out of the way. This one, so yeah, this is a crime book with some folktales and magic stuff in it. Yeah, I'm gonna read this alongside Anything Could Happen. So these will be my books for, I don't know if they're the right way around. Yep, these will be my books for next week. Yeah, I will see you then. Again, I don't know how to end these. I just feel, I mean, that probably would have been a good ending, but I still feel like an unwanted, oh, hello, you've just fallen on me. I still feel like a house guest who doesn't know how to get out of your house. So, feel like I'm going to have to do what I did last week and just, right,